The night Aaron Miles first sensed the truth about his marriage didn't arrive quietly. Dree per trummer chomchurks etter. It came in on the back of a storm, the kind that rolls over an American suburb like a slow-moving beast, heavy with warning. Most people that night stayed inside. Lights dim, windows rattling under the sky's temper. But one house on Hemlock Ridge Lane glowed faintly through the wind, not warm, not inviting. A strange low flicker pulsed in the backyard, too steady to be lightning, too controlled to be chance. Napper. Aaron noticed it from the upstairs hallway window as he passed by with a load of laundry folded neatly in his arms. At first he thought it was just his wife, Kara, setting out candles again. She liked to make their backyard look pretty, especially on nights she called emotionally heavy. That was her phrase for anything from stress at work to irritation at her mother's calls. But this flicker wasn't soft or decorative, it was sharper, more purposeful. He stood still, listened. The storm hadn't broken fully yet, but the sky trembled with distant thunder. No one sane would be outside. And yet in the faint glow he saw movement, a hand, a silhouette, the outline of someone leaning over the fire pit behind their house. He set the laundry down without realizing he did. Something cold slipped into his chest. For 11 years he had trusted the stability of this home, trusted that the quiet parts of marriage meant safety, not secrecy, trusted that Kara's late nights were simply late nights, that her mother's constant involvement in their lives was nothing more than smothering affection. And tonight the storm didn't climb into the sky. It bloomed in his chest. Aaron slipped downstairs, moving carefully, deliberately, not fearful, just aware. He opened the sliding door from the kitchen slowly enough that the frame didn't rattle. The backyard smelled different. Not just smoke, something darker, the scent of burning paper, thick and chemical. The wind gusted hard enough to spray stinging cold against his face, and for a moment the flames in the pit rose higher, illuminating two figures. Kara and her mother Diana both crouched beside the fire, their hair pulled back tight, their gestures urgent but controlled. They weren't warming themselves, they weren't burning yard debris, they were feeding the fire like priests at an altar. He stood there, unseen, in the half-shadow of their home. The next moment happened fast. A gust of wind flung ash directly toward him, scattering glowing fragments across the grass. One fragment still intact enough to reveal ink spun at his feet. His breath stalled. It wasn't just paper. It was a certificate, cream-colored, official-looking, a document with a faint border he knew better than his own handwriting. He bent down and picked it up. The corner burned away, but the top line still visible. Marriage certificate, Aaron Miles and Kara Whitfield. He didn't feel the wind anymore, didn't hear the thunder, just the faint cracking sound of his world shifting. He looked up again, this time fully. Kara held a new document in her hands, tucked inside a plastic sleeve to protect it from the flames. Her mother whispered something to her, nodding, guiding her, like she was coaching her through a ritual. The original certificate, the one they signed 11 years ago, was burning, and Kara wasn't even watching it. There some chance. She stared at the new document with the kind of fixation that didn't belong to an accident. This wasn't an argument burned out of impulse. This wasn't a memory discarded. This was a replacement, a rewrite, a lie being prepared. Aaron stepped back into the house quietly, closing the sliding door with a breath so slow it barely fogged the glass. He watched from inside, careful not to let his shadow fall across the curtain. Kara reached into the fire pit with a metal rod and pushed the last intact corner of their original certificate deeper into the flames, making sure it disappeared. Her mother looked around the yard cautiously, making sure no one saw. The moment their eyes scanned past the house, Aaron stepped back, silent and visible. He didn't confront them, didn't open the door and demand an explanation, didn't shout or panic or accuse. Instead, he let a strange, heavy stillness settle inside him, the kind that comes when a man realizes his world has already been set in motion behind his back. He went upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed they shared. The storm finally cracked open outside, rain hitting the windows like gravel. Somewhere downstairs, the two women laughed softly. Kara's laugh was the worst part. Light, casual, unbothered, he tried to imagine a world where the burning was innocent. But the mind, when faced with truth, stops protecting you. It showed him every detail again, clearer this time. A new document, a carefully burned original, her mother coaching her through it, and Kara unmoved. A hot pressure built beneath Aaron's ribs. Not anger, something quieter, something steady, a quiet, razor-edged understanding that this night wasn't the beginning. It was the moment he finally caught up to what had already begun. You know, people don't burn marriage certificates unless they're preparing to erase something, rewrite something, claim something else entirely. And Kara, his wife of 11 years, was erasing him. He kept replaying their last 6 months together. Nights, she came home late from work. Days, she seemed distracted but unusually affectionate when Diana visited. The sudden obsession with organizing old paperwork, her insistence on handling things more independently, her quiet request that he sign small forms without reading them, it had all been building. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one gathering inside the house. The next morning, the world pretended that nothing had happened. Kara made coffee. She hummed while she made eggs. Nanda Nankayanda scoffed a mash. She kissed him on the cheek, lightly, rehearsed, polite. If he hadn't seen the fire, he would have believed the performance completely. But once you see the crack in a wall, you can no longer pretend the house is stable. He watched her movements, the way she avoided meeting his eyes too long, the way she kept glancing at her phone, the way she looked relieved, actually relieved, when he didn't mention anything about the night before. Her mother texted her several times that morning. He could tell by the faint glow from her screen and ... the way she pressed the phone to her chest afterward, satisfied by some result. Aaron didn't ask. He carried the silence like a blade. In the following days, small things began to stand out. Kara was on the phone more, not playful calls, tense ones. She began telling him to let her check the mail instead of him doing it. She spent more evenings at her mother's house. Their bedroom grew colder, not physical, but in all the small ways that matter, the touches that weren't there anymore, the conversations that suddenly felt. And the strangest part, Kara wasn't nervous. She was preparing whatever she had planned. She believed he wouldn't suspect. She believed she had control over every variable. She believed he was the same predictable husband he had always been, patient, trusting, slow to anger, eager to keep peace. She believed he wouldn't look too closely. She believed he would accept whatever came, and that belief was her first mistake. The second mistake arrived a week later, a letter addressed to him, Strawford by the county court. Inside was a notification, a petition for annulment, not divorce, annulment. The legal claim, Aaron Miles had coerced Kara into marriage before she turned 18, a felony in their state. The signature at the bottom of the petition was his, forgedged. He could almost see the pen in Kara's hand. Could almost hear her mother instructing her on how to copy the curve of the A, the slant of the M. The next line in the letter felt unreal. Kara was requesting immediate legal separation, supervised interviews, and an investigation into her underage marriage. A Cain, a crime he never committed, a past that never existed, a lie that could destroy him completely. People assume betrayal is loud, screaming, chaos, slamming doors. But sometimes betrayal shows up in a quiet envelope with a county seal. Aaron sat at the kitchen table, the letter between his hands, listening to the ticking of the wall clock, a sound suddenly too sharp. The storm from that night hadn't ended. It had grown roots inside his home. Kara walked into the kitchen, pretending not to notice the envelope, pretending not to know the world she just set in motion, pretending innocence so well that any other man might have believed it, but Aaron saw everything. The tremor in her fingers, the faint smirk she quickly hid, the way she waited, silently, for him to panic. He looked up slowly, letting the silence stretch, and that was the moment Kara's confidence cracked. Just a flicker, barely noticeable, but it was enough. A guilty mind always reacts when it expected chaos and received calm. He didn't confront her, didn't shout the questions burning in his chest, didn't accuse her of forgery or deceit, not yet, because men who confront too early lose everything. And Kara had already planned far too much for this to be impulsive. He needed to understand what she was building, what story she was crafting, what future she was trying to erase him from, because burning a marriage certificate wasn't just about destroying a document. It was about erasing a history, his history, their history, and replacing it with a version that benefited her and her mother. Aaron slid the letter back into the envelope, folded it neatly, and placed it in the drawer beside the fridge, as if it were nothing more than a phone bill, as if it didn't have the power to shatter his life. That evening, Kara and her mother met again in the backyard. No fire this time, just whispers. Careful, rehearsed, plotting whispers. Aaron watched from upstairs, hidden behind the frame of the window. And as he watched, a single realization crystallized inside him like ice. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a setup, a trap designed months in advance, a performance, a weapon, and he was the intended target. But betrayal has a strange way of creating something unexpected in a man: clarity. Aaron didn't break, didn't panic. Bah! Didn't crumble, he simply woke up, the kind of awakening that doesn't show on the surface. The kind that sits deep in the bone, patient, calculating. Kara and her mother thought they were building a narrative strong enough to ruin him. But they didn't know something important. A man who sees the fire burning before he's thrown into it is a man who will quietly learn where the sparks began. And a man who learns where the sparks began is a man who can burn down the entire plan before anyone realizes the flames have changed direction. The storm outside had long passed, but the one inside the Miles household had only begun. The letter arrived on a calm Thursday morning. The kind of morning, that tries to convince a man the world is still predictable. The sun was soft, the coffee warm, the neighborhood quiet enough to hear the distant hum of lawn sprinklers. Nothing in the air hinted at the destruction sealed inside a plain white envelope. Aaron found it wedged between utility bills and a grocery circular. At first glance, it looked routine, stamped with the county seal and his name typed neatly across the center. He assumed it was something mundane, property taxes, a clerical update, maybe a notice about neighborhood regulations. Nothing in his life prepared him for what was actually inside. He tore the envelope open with a thumb, unfolded the sheet of paper, and felt the entire world pivot. It wasn't a bill, it wasn't a notice, it was the beginning of a story he didn't write, a petition felled by him requesting annulment, not divorce, not separation, annulment, the legal erasure of an entire marriage. According to the document, Aaron Miles had come forward to confess that he forced Kara Whitfield into marriage before she turned 18, that he manipulated her, pressured her, used his position to bind her into a relationship she was too young to consent to. It painted him as a predator, a controlling older man, a danger, the kind of man a community doesn't just judge, it discards. And at the bottom of the document, longer than his hand, sat his signature perfectly forged. The paper didn't shake in his hand, but something inside him did, not panic, not anger, something sharper. Something that felt like the moment a man realizes the knife in his back, wasn't an accident, it was placed there by the hands he loved most. He set the letter on the counter carefully, like it might bite. The accusations were clear. Kara had been a minor when they married. He had coerced her. She wanted the marriage voided. He was taking responsibility for the mistake. It was a narrative crafted with precision, a trap disguised in legal language. And the first thought that surged into Aaron's mind wasn't why. It was, how long had they been planning this? And he slid the paper back into the envelope and closed it quietly as Kara's footsteps approached from the hallway. She walked into the kitchen like the morning was no different from any other, hair tied loosely, soft sweater hanging off her shoulder, the image of the gentle wife she pretended to be. She smiled, the kind of smile that lands just a little too early, like it was waiting. Then her eyes drifted to the envelope, and in that microsecond, that tiny shift in her gaze, Aaron saw everything. Rectification, relief, satisfaction. The trap had sprung. Her face softened into practiced concern. She reached for a glass, filled it slowly, deliberately, trying hard to appear oblivious to the letter sitting between them like a live wire. But a guilty mind exposes itself in the stillness. Aaron watched her in silence, the way he had watched the fire in the backyard, the way he watched her mother guide her through the burning of their marriage certificate, the way he watched their whispers through the glass when they believed he was too naive to notice. He didn't ask anything, didn't confront her, not yet, because this wasn't a moment of anger, this was a moment of clarity. Kara finally turned toward him, taking a slow sip of water. "You're quiet today," she said softly, pretending to study his face. He didn't respond, and his silence cracked her confidence like a hammer to glass. Her expression faltered, a tiny slip, but enough to expose the truth beneath. She wasn't worried about his silence. She was worried he might have read the letter. When he didn't react the way she expected, she softened her posture, the way someone does when they've rehearsed their next move. That's when the tears came, fast, perfect, controlled, not tears of fear, not tears of guilt, rehearsed tears. She sat down across from him, letting her breath tremble just enough to sound believable. "I knew this day would be painful," she whispered, her voice a fragile, trembling thing crafted for sympathy. "I knew you'd try to deny it. Denny what? A life he never lived, a crime he never committed?" But she wasn't talking to him, she was talking to the version of him she needed for the story. Her voice cracked delicately. "I didn't know how to protect myself from you. The lie was elegant in its cruelty. She wasn't speaking to find truth, she was speaking to frame it. Her trembling hands brushed away tears that looked almost too perfect. "I loved you," she said, shaking her head, "but I was a child. You took advantage of me. You stole years I can't get back." The accusation landed like a stone dropped into deep water. But Aaron didn't flinch because something else was becoming painfully clear. She wasn't just lying. She had practiced this speech, memorized it, probably rehearsed it into a mirror under her mother's guidance, refining every tremble, every sigh, every whispered phrase meant to shatter a man who didn't deserve any of it. He spoke only 4 words. Low, controlled, "When did you decide?" Her tears froze instantly. Because she wasn't prepared for composure, she was prepared for denial, for begging, for the outburst of a guilty man. Okay? His calmness threatened her entire plan. She lowered her gaze, gripping the glass tightly. The performance slipped for a moment, revealing the coldness beneath Aaron. "Please don't make this harder." He let the silence answer for him. He wasn't asking about the accusation. He was asking when their marriage ended, but she didn't hear that. She was too focused on maintaining her script. When she realized he wasn't reacting, she shifted tactics, leaning into a deeper tone of sorrow. "Mom told me it would come to this," she said quietly. "She warned me you'd twist everything," her mother. Of course, the architect behind every lie, every plan, every manipulation. The woman who stood behind Kara like a puppeteer, guiding her through life with strings made of guilt and control. And now, through those same strings, she was trying to destroy him. Kara inhaled shakily. "The court will decide," she whispered. "I just want the truth to come out." But the truth wasn't what she wanted. Only the version of the truth that handed her everything she and her mother had worked for. Annulment would strip him of assets, erase alimony rights, and leave him legally condemned. If the claim stuck, it wouldn't just end the marriage, it would redefine his entire identity. A predator, a manipulator, a man unfit to trust, a lie powerful enough to ruin a life overnight. As Kara wiped her tears, she waited for him to crumble, but he didn't. He simply stood, folded the envelope, and placed it gently in the drawer the same way he had done with the last one. There was something too calm in the way he moved. A calmness that unsettled her enough to make her swallow nervously. For a woman whose entire plan hinged on predictable reactions, unpredictability was deadly. "Ka." She whispered his name, but he didn't answer. He walked out the back door instead, stepping into the morning sunlight that felt strangely colder now. The air was still, but his mind raced with patterns, timelines, small moments that suddenly aligned into a clearer picture. The fire, the whispers, the staged affection, the sudden distance, the forged signature, a plan months in the making. A narrative designed by 2 women who believed he would collapse under pressure the way they needed him to. But something unexpected had formed inside him, a strange, razor-sharp focus that comes only when a man realizes he's been hunted. He stood in the yard, staring at the fire pit where they had destroyed the original certificate, the only real proof of their shared past. The flames were gone now, replaced by cold gray ash, a ash that once carried the truth. Ash that once documented a life built honestly, ash that was supposed to bury him. Kara joined him outside moments later, mascara smudged to perfect imperfection. She reached for his arm as if trying to salvage the illusion of concern. But when she touched him, he felt nothing, no warmth, no sadness. Just a clear understanding of the battle she was preparing to drag him into. He stepped away from her gently. Not with anger, with clarity, because men who scream lose control, men who panic lose ground. Yokinaku, men who beg lose dignity, but men who observe, men who stay quiet. Men who gather the truth piece by piece, those men end wars before the enemy realizes they've already lost. Kara's expression hardened as she watched him walk back inside. Something in her eyes shifted, irritation mixed with fear. Not fear of him, fear of unpredictability. Her mother arrived within the hour. She didn't knock, she never knocked. Diana swept into the house like a gust of judgment, eyes narrowed, lips pressed into a line of rehearsed outrage. She placed a comforting hand on Kara's shoulder, whispering something sharp and poisonous, something meant to reinforce their story, something meant to position themselves as victims of the man standing a few feet away. Aaron watched their performance unfold, and the more he watched, the more he understood. He wasn't dealing with impulsive betrayal. He was dealing with generational manipulation. This wasn't the first time they had executed a plan like this, and unless he understood their history, it wouldn't be the last. Later that night, as they whispered behind closed doors, a single question began to form inside him. A question that would soon lead him down the darkest path of his life. If they were willing to burn the past, forge the present, and weaponize the law, what else had they done? And more importantly, what else were they planning? The house fell quiet after midnight, but Aaron didn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of betrayal settle into a shape he could finally understand. He wasn't the man they believed they could destroy, he was the man they should have never underestimated. And tomorrow, he would begin uncovering the truth they spent years hiding. A truth that would lead him into the next stage of the storm. The days that followed were unusually quiet in the way a forest becomes still before a storm, the kind of quiet that doesn't calm nerves but tightens them. People often mistake silence for surrender, and Kara was no different. She took Aaron's stillness as proof that he was breaking apart, that her accusations had struck deep enough to make him crumble. But silence was never Aaron's defeat. It was his study, his observation, his preparation. He learned over the years that anger blinds a man faster than grief, and in his home, anger was a trap carefully placed for him. Kara wasn't looking for truth. She was looking for an outburst she could weaponize. So he gave her nothing, no raised voice, no trembling hands, no desperate plea to defend himself. He simply watched. And in watching, he saw everything. Kara moved through the house like someone rehearsing a role. Her steps suddenly gentle, her sighs theatrical, her eyes downcast when she knew he was near. But the moment she believed she was out of sight, her posture shifted into something sharp, calculating, urgent, purposeful. She made frequent calls behind closed doors, whispered conversations, quick pauses whenever she sensed movement in the hallway. Aaron began noticing small details, the kind men in honest marriages never think to track. Her mother's car showing up unannounced, documents being carried into their bedroom and carried back out in a different folder. A new lock added to a drawer she never used before. And then there were the financial traces, barely disguised but impossible to miss. One afternoon, Aaron logged into their joint bank account to pay a routine bill. What he found was a series of transfers he hadn't authorized. Small measured amounts sent from their shared funds into an account he didn't recognize. The transfers weren't large enough to raise flags, but they were frequent. Intentional. Kara was moving money. Slowly, quietly. Preparing to survive without him, most men would confront their spouse in outrage. Aaron didn't. Instead, he printed statements, stored them where Kara would never think to look, and kept his expression unmoved when she entered the room behind him, pretending to fold laundry she never touched. Watching her was like watching a stranger wearing his wife's skin. The mask slipped most around her mother. That woman had always walked like someone who believed the world owed her a debt she intended to collect. In the past, Aaron dismissed her sharp comments as bitterness from a hard life. But now, observing her through a different lens, he saw a pattern. Her smiles were too thin, her concern too forced. She carried herself like a prosecutor even around family, especially around Kara, who bent under her words like brittle glass. The betrayal hadn't begun with Kara, it had roots, deep ones, but roots leave trails. Aaron had no intention of confronting either woman until he understood what he was up against. So he continued quietly, studying their rhythm, their whispers, the tension they tried to mask. And the more he watched, the more unsettling the puzzle became because the forged petition wasn't spontaneous. The script Kara delivered wasn't improvised. Someone had been preparing her, carefully, strategically, deliberately. The first undeniable proof came late one evening. Kara believed he'd gone to sleep early, but Aaron stood in the hallway, waiting. She tiptoed past the bedroom, carrying her phone and a thin binder tucked beneath her arm. Her footsteps creaked softly as she descended the stairs to the living room. Aaron followed at a distance, moving with the patience of a man who had spent years working maintenance jobs where silence was survival. He positioned himself just close enough to catch the low murmur from the living room. Hedekar, it was her mother's voice, sharp, commanding, and Kara's soft, trembling, obedient. But obedience born not from fear, obedience born from grooming. Her mother walked her line by line through a narrative they had crafted. Stories of a girl manipulated, controlled, guided into a marriage she never wanted. Stories Kara repeated with mechanical precision, like a student memorizing paragraphs for a performance. Then came the binder, pages being turned, instructions being reviewed, altered photos, staged timelines, false financial entries, all to make Aaron look like a man who preyed on a younger woman. Every lie a brick, every brick a prison. Aaron felt something cold coil around his ribs. Not fear, clarity. Betrayal, once confirmed, no longer burns with emotion. It hardens into focus. He stepped back, returning to bed before Kara ended her rehearsal, lying in the dark as she slipped quietly beside him, pretending to fall asleep within seconds. Her breathing was rapid, not from exhaustion, but from a rehearsed adrenaline she had no idea he knew, and he had no intention of letting her know, not yet. In the days that followed, the whispers in town grew heavier, and Aaron could feel the air around him shift. People he'd known for years now avoided his eyes. Conversations died when he walked into rooms. Mothers shielded their children with a subtle turn of the shoulder. Accusations spoken behind his back were almost louder than the forged ones written on legal paper, but still, silence. Aaron kept observing. He watched the way Kara clung to her phone, darting into private corners to continue her rehearsed lines. He saw the way her mother's car lingered at the curb at odd hours, headlights off, engine running, like someone surveying a crime scene before ensuring the victim had died. Ergating Sakabdan Avendire. He listened to the way Kara's voice trembled in forced fear when she spoke publicly, yet hardened into steel once she believed she was alone. The cracks weren't hard to find. Kara had begun recording conversations with him, placing her phone discreetly on tables, in pockets of her sweater, under cushions. But she failed in subtlety, a screen glow too bright, a misplaced vibration, a microphone pointed too directly. Aaron caught every attempt and he gave her nothing she could use. Agak. His restraint infuriated her mother, whose tone grew sharper with every call Kara received. They were expecting rage, expecting denial, expecting the kind of explosive reaction that would make the lies believable. But Aaron was done playing the part they had written for him, and instead, he studied the woman he once vowed to protect. He watched her unravel behind the walls they were constructing together. He noticed her guilt at odd moments she quickly smothered under her mother's guidance. Her guilt wasn't enough to save her, not anymore, but it told Aaron something crucial. This betrayal was not entirely hers. Whatever had been planted in Kara's mind had taken root long before she met him. That answer, he knew, lay buried in her past, in the town she left behind. Cax, in the hands of the woman who shaped her. So Aaron made his decision, not in anger, not in desperation, but in cold, quiet resolve. He would leave town. Not permanently, not in defeat, but to uncover the truth no one wanted him to find. He packed a small bag the night before, careful not to disrupt the domestic stage Kara was performing in. He left before dawn, keys tucked in hand, footsteps silent, the house still in its pretense of peace. Hathaket of Dober. As he drove through empty streets, past dim streetlights and shuttered storefronts, the weight of betrayal settled into something sharper, purpose. What Kara and her mother had started was not a marriage collapse, it was a generational crime, a pattern, and patterns leave long shadows. Aaron intended to follow every one of them. The road stretched ahead like a path toward truth, dark, winding, and full of answers the two women never imagined he would seek. What he would discover next wouldn't just explain their betrayal, it would expose everything, and when he returned, he would not return as the man they targeted. He would return as the man they should have feared from the beginning. The morning Aaron reached the outskirts of Ridgewood, the town Kara never spoke about, unless pressed. He felt the weight of a history he had unknowingly married into. The place didn't look dangerous, it looked forgotten. A stretch of cracked sidewalks, shuttered stores, and weather-worn houses that had surrendered long ago to time and disappointment. Kara always said Ridgewood was small, but she never mentioned how quiet it was. Quiet in the same way she became when lying, still, controlled, hollow. Aaron parked near an old gas station where the morning fog clung to the windows like dust on memory. He stepped out, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and rust. It wasn't a hostile town, but it felt weary, as if holding its breath, waiting for someone to ask the wrong questions. He was here to do exactly that. He began where any old story started, in the neighborhoods where Kara grew up. The house her family once lived in still stood, a sagging structure with peeling paint and a yard overtaken by weeds. No one had lived there in years, but people remembered it. They remembered them. A woman sweeping her porch across the street noticed him staring. She was older, her gray hair braided down her back, her eyes sharp with the kind of insight small towns often develop. "You looking for someone?" she asked, not unkindly but cautiously. Aaron introduced himself, careful not to reveal too much too soon. When he mentioned Kara's name, the woman paused mid-sweep. Something flickered across her face. A discomfort she quickly smothered with polite neutrality. Her family wasn't well liked around here. The words were delivered calmly, but they struck Aaron like a warning. He asked gentle questions. She hesitated at first, but the memory of the family seemed to stir something she'd long tried to forget. Yeah, Kara's mother, she knew how to twist things, good at making trouble, real good. Took advantage of men who didn't see the trap in time. Aaron felt his pulse tighten. What kind of trouble? The woman leaned on her broom, lowering her voice instinctively. Accusations. Claims. Men, she said, mistreated her or her daughter. The police came here more times than I can count. Nothing ever stuck, though, except the damage she left behind. She explained how several men in town were nearly ruined, accused of things they swore never happened, how some neighbors stood with them and others stayed silent out of fear. Ridgewood was too small to survive the storms Kara's mother created, and yet somehow she always came out looking like the victim. Aaron listened without interrupting, absorbing every detail, but the woman wasn't done. "You're her husband, right?" she asked quietly. "I recognized the last name, thought you'd come around sooner or later." He nodded. Her expression softened with a grim kind of sympathy, the kind people reserve for those walking into truths heavier than they realize. You're not the first one she's done this to." The words carried weight. Too much weight. Aaron thanked her and moved on, heart steady but mind racing. He visited 3 more houses. Each person had a story, different in details, identical in nature, a pattern of manipulation, lies crafted with precision. Men blindsided by claims that shattered their jobs, their families, their futures, and always, Kara's mother behind it. Cat whispering, coaching, directing, but the most disturbing part was yet to come. Aaron drove to Ridgewood High School, where Kara spent her teenage years. The campus was small, its walls faded, its parking lot cracked. The school secretary, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, remembered Kara immediately. "Mavis Mita." "Oh, that girl," she whispered. "Pretty, quiet, but always seemed rehearsed." Like every word was chosen for her, Aaron felt the back of his neck tighten again. "What about her mother?" he asked. The secretary grimaced. "That woman was here more than some students. Every few months, some incident, some complaint, always a crisis, always someone else's fault." It was the next thing she said that stopped Aaron cold. Kara had a boyfriend once, sweet kid, kind. He tried to stand up to her mother about something. Next thing we knew, he was gone, moved away. Or so she claimed, but nobody ever saw him again. Aaron felt a slow chill crawl down his spine. "Kai Feng?" asked Tai Eng. "Do you remember his name?" The secretary hesitated. "Liam Davenport." "Liam Davenport." Aaron repeated it silently. "Liam." A name Kara never once mentioned. A ghost erased from her past, the secretary continued, lowering her voice. "That boy tried to tell people that Kara's mother was forcing her to make claims against him. Claims that weren't true. He said he had proof, said he was going to the police, and then?" Aaron pressed. She shook her head. "Then he disnapped Babav. Then he disappeared. His family left town. No notice. No forwarding address. Nothing." A familiar realization crept into Aaron's mind. Not fear, but connection. He wasn't fighting a spontaneous betrayal. He was fighting a legacy of destruction, a blueprint they had used for years, and he had walked into it blind. Aaron left the school, driving to the town library where old newspapers were stored. He spent hours combing through faded articles, police records, local gossip columns. Every few years, a story appeared involving accusations made by a woman in the community, claims that seemed valid at first glance, devastating to the men involved. But none of them resulted in charges, none had proof, none had closure, and the same 2 names emerged again and again, always peripheral, never central, but unmistakable: Kara and her mother, Delilah Ward. Aaron leaned back in the stiff wooden chair, the rustle of old paper loud in the quiet room. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the pieces settle. He had married into a family that survived by destroying men, and he was simply their newest target. But unlike the others, he didn't flee, he didn't break, he didn't drown beneath false accusations or run from the shame stamped onto him. He was still standing. And something else became clear, crystal clear. The reason they were so desperate, the reason they forged documents and invented timelines, the reason they burned evidence in the backyard, and they needed Aaron ruined, not because of who he was, but because of what he represented. A man who wouldn't bend, a man they couldn't manipulate, a man with a clean record, steady reputation, and a mind sharp enough to see through them. He was a threat. And not to their plan, but to their legacy. Before leaving Ridgewood, Aaron made one final stop. There was an old family friend the secretary mentioned, someone who left town years ago but recently returned after a messy divorce. A man who had once been close enough to Kara's family to see things others missed. Aaron found him at a small auto shop near the highway. A tall man with weathered hands and a cautious stare. "And you're Kara's husband," the man said before Aaron even introduced himself. "I figured you'd end up here someday." The man, Calvin, invited him into the back office. There was no small talk, no hesitation. Calvin had been there when Kara was around 15. He'd seen how Delilah coached her daughter, molding her into the perfect vessel for her schemes. He remembered Liam, remembered the fear that drove his family out of town overnight. He even remembered Delilah bragging quietly, smugly, to a neighbor about getting out of another one. Calvin looked at Aaron with a kind of exhausted pity. "You think you're the first? No. But you better make sure you're the last." Aaron didn't flinch, he didn't speak. He didn't look away, he simply absorbed the truth he came for. When he finally walked out of Ridgewood, the town seemed even quieter than when he'd arrived. But this time, the silence wasn't ominous, it was confirmation. He knew who he was dealing with. He knew what they were capable of, he knew how deeply rooted their corruption was, and now he knew what must be done. The drive back home felt different. Not lighter, not heavier. Just final. He wasn't returning as the man they believed they'd broken. He was returning as the man who now held their entire past in his hands. Everything they tried to bury was rising to the surface. And when the reckoning came, it wouldn't just expose them, it would end them. The night Aaron returned from Ridgewood, the sky over his house was starless. Dark, muted, and heavy, like the universe itself had pressed its palm over the sky, silencing everything beneath it. It was fitting, he thought. Some plans were born in darkness, some truth thrived there, some traps required it. Kara and her mother had built their scheme with whispers and shadows. Aaron would dismantle it the same way, quietly, methodically, unseen. He walked into the house without announcing himself. The rooms were dim, the lights low, the silence thick. Kara wasn't home, neither was her mother. They were likely out perfecting another layer of their narrative, another accusation, another poison to feed the world in the coming court hearing. Good, he needed time alone. He sat at the kitchen table, the same place where Kara once laughed, once confided in him, once pretended to love him, and began spreading out the documents he had collected. Bank transfers, forged petitions, altered receipts, copies of messages they had deleted, public records from Ridgewood, newspaper clippings, statements from neighbors, a timeline of their manipulation stretching back years, a web of deceit carefully sewn by two women who believed they were untouchable. But every web has a loose thread if you pull hard enough. Aaron had found many. He organized each piece of evidence with a precision that made the kitchen look less like a home and more like a war table. Papers lined the counters, sticky notes marked patterns, and recordings played softly as he replayed, rewound, replayed again. Not to confirm what he knew, but to memorize it. Every lie had a tone, every manipulation had a rhythm. Every false accusation carried the same rehearsed cadence. He wasn't just collecting evidence, he was studying his enemy's language. The first step of his trap was simple: let them believe they were winning. He returned to silence. He returned to stillness. He returned to the role of the quiet victim, at least outwardly. Kara noticed his exhaustion but misread it. She interpreted his calm as collapse. Her mother interpreted it as victory. Perfect. But the real work began when Aaron reached out to the last person they expected, Madison Hale, Kara's closest friend. Madison was loyalty-bound, or so Kara thought, but Aaron had watched Madison for years. She was not loyal, she was afraid. Afraid of Delilah Ward's influence, afraid of being ostracized, afraid of consequences. But she was also fed up, and fear, when mixed with resentment, becomes a powerful lever. Aaron contacted her late one evening, choosing a neutral public space, an old diner off the highway. Madison arrived shaking, her eyes darting toward every shadow, every customer, every reflection. Sure, to assign and preter as the Dians and sign a son the plactor and sir the factoratant and cots. "Aaron," she whispered, sliding into the booth. "I shouldn't be here." "You should," he replied, voice calm. "Because I know what they're planning." Her hands trembled. He didn't accuse her. He didn't threaten her. He didn't even ask questions. Instead, he slid a single piece of paper across the table, an old message Delilah sent her. Steyr Dranhurster Starred, instructing her how to lie on a past statement involving someone else years ago. Yawking, Madison stared at it, color draining from her face. "You kept that?" she whispered. "I kept everything," Aaron said. "And I'm not here to hurt you, I'm here to stop them, and I need someone who's tired of pretending." Madison broke, not dramatically, not loudly, canned, but with a soft, defeated exhale, the way someone collapses after fighting a battle they never believed they'd survive. I'm done helping them, she said, staring at her shaking hands. I can't do it anymore, she not talked. She talkin'. Not everything at first. She was cautious, testing whether Aaron was truly different. But once she began, the floodgates opened. She knew about the forged petition, she knew about the doctored photos. She knew about the fake journals Kara's mother forced her daughter to write in, entries backdated to make it seem like Aaron had been controlling her for years. She even knew about the burner phone they used to fabricate threatening messages. Madison had been the silent witness to years of manipulation, and now finally, she had chosen a side, not Aaron's, not Kara's, the truths. Aaron recorded her statements with her permission, each word adding another layer to his growing arsenal. But even that wasn't enough. He needed something stronger, something irrefutable, something that would implode their scheme from the inside. He needed Delilah and Kara to incriminate themselves, and that required bait, so he said it. Over the next few days, Aaron created a script of his own, not of lies but of opportunity. He pretended to panic at the incoming court hearing. He pretended to crumble under pressure. He pretended to lose confidence and control. He let Kara hear muffled frustration through closed doors. He let her mother catch glimpses of him shredding papers that were meaningless. He let them believe he was spiraling. People like them only show their full hand when they believe the other person is broken. And soon enough they took the bait. Kara began cornering him with carefully phrased remarks, probing, fishing, trying to provoke admissions or phrases she could twist in recordings. But Aaron never gave her anything useful. Instead, he planted lines he wanted them to hear. I don't think I can fight this. I'm not sure how the judge will see things. I made mistakes, but I don't know how to explain them. Each sentence crafted to pull them closer and lower their guard. Because people who believe they've already won stop hiding the truth. One evening, Kara slipped into his office, believing he wasn't home. She rifled through drawers, pulled out files, photographed documents he had placed there deliberately, planting false confidence inside her. What she didn't know was that Aaron had placed a silent recording device under the desk, one she herself had unknowingly purchased months prior while trying to trap him. Her whispered call to her mother was recorded in full. "We've got him. He's falling apart. He won't survive the hearing." Aaron replayed the words later that night, not with hatred but with a cold, measured calm. Step by step, he was turning their own machinery against them. He met with attorneys next. Not the ones Kara believed she had influenced, but a seasoned professional recommended by Madison. A man who specialized in cases built on fabricated accusations. A man who had a reputation for dismantling lies with surgical precision. Aaron didn't bring emotion into the meeting. He brought facts. Fern arranged meticulously recordings labeled with timestamps, written statements, digital trails, bank inputs and outputs. And the entire documented history from Ridgewood. The attorney studied everything, face unreadable, but his eyes sharp. This, he finally said, isn't just a defense, this is exposure. Aaron nodded. That's exactly what I intend. The attorney leaned back, a slow smirk forming, not of arrogance but of respect. They think the hearing will destroy you, he said. They have no idea. It's the day everything collapses for them. The plan was set. Aaron didn't need to confront Kara or her mother anymore. He didn't need to accuse them. He didn't need to reveal. He knew their entire history. He simply needed to show up to court, because every lie they built was about to be illuminated, not by him, not by anger, but by their own words, their own documentation, their own patterns repeated over years. The night before the hearing, Kara and her mother laughed in the living room, confident, triumphant, two architects celebrating the fall of their newest prey. They didn't know Aaron stood at the top of the stairs, watching them, not with pain, not with bitterness, not even with anger, but with a calm realization tomorrow was not the end of the marriage. It was the end of a legacy, one they believed would last forever. And as Kara lifted her wine glass, toasting to a future free from him, Aaron quietly walked back into his room, the evidence secured, the recordings backed up, the affidavits signed, the attorney prepped. He had turned silence into strategy, he had turned observation into weaponry, he had turned their lies into dynamite. The fuse was already lit, and when the explosion came, it would be in a room filled with witnesses, officials, and the very community they planned to manipulate. The truth was no longer hidden, it was waiting. No one ever forgets the sound of a courtroom door closing behind them. It doesn't slam, just clicks, gently, almost polite, as if it welcomes everyone inside equally. But on that morning, the click sounded final, absolute, like the lid shutting on a coffin. The room was full, too full. The benches were crowded with neighbors who once waved to Aaron from across the street, church members who once asked him to help move furniture or fix a porch light. Now they were here to watch him fall, or at least that was the story Kara and her mother had been feeding them. Aaron stepped inside without hesitation, calm, unhurried, almost detached, as if he'd already accepted whatever was coming. But beneath that stillness lay precision, cold, focused, unblinking, the kind of focus a man develops only when he's been pushed to the absolute edge and learned to stand there without trembling. Kara sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, dressed in muted colors, hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked small, fragile, and deliberately terrified, exactly the image she and her mother had planned. Her mother sat beside her, posture perfect, chin lifted, the quiet arrogance of someone who believed she had already won. Together, they looked like victims who expected sympathy, victims who expected applause for their courage, victims who had built their entire performance on lies. The judge entered, and everyone rose. Aaron kept his eyes forward. He didn't look at Kara Shunat Kair by man the Shomer. He didn't look at Kara, not yet, he didn't need to. He knew she'd stare at him, gauging, measuring, searching for fear, desperation, a hint of emotional weakness she could feed on, but Aaron's face held nothing. Just the same unreadable calm he'd mastered during those weeks of silence. Silence they assumed was defeat. They were wrong. The hearing began with routine procedure, but the tension was immediate, thick enough that even the air felt heavier. And then the judge asked the prosecution, Kara's side, to present their testimony. Kara rose slowly, making sure each movement appeared delicate, trembling. She walked to the stand, eyes lowered, lips pressed together in a perfect imitation of trauma. Her voice cracked on cue, her breath hitched exactly where she had practiced. She spoke about fear, about being taken advantage of, about years of hidden suffering, and every sentence, every tear, every pause was crafted with precision her mother had drilled into her. It was a performance honed to perfection, like a polished blade sharpened on someone else's life. Cackett, her mother followed, reinforcing every detail, adding legal phrasing she'd memorized, recounting moments that never happened, describing Aaron as a controlling shadow lurking in their lives. Every word was meant to carve him apart. The courtroom absorbed it all, some with sympathy, others with morbid curiosity. The whispers spread like smoke, drifting from bench to bench. By the time they finished, Aaron's reputation lay on the floor like an open wound. The judge turned to him, Mr. Cole. You may respond, and just like that the room shifted, everyone leaned forward. Even Kara, despite her act, couldn't hide the faintest tightening in her jaw, because this was the part she assumed would confirm everything she had said. She expected him to stumble, to break, to plead. Instead, Aaron stood with a quiet steadiness that made the entire room fall unnaturally still. He approached the center of the courtroom with a small binder in his hand. Nothing dramatic, nothing that screamed revelation. Just a simple binder, but the contents inside it were the fire they could not control. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and measured, not emotional, not angry, not defensive. A tone that cut cleaner than any outburst ever could. He started with dates, then numbers. Then, bank transfers from accounts Kara had opened without his knowledge. Voices in the room shifted, some frowns, some confusion. And then he played the first audio clip, Kara's voice, clear, crisp, unmistakable, laughing coldly about how easy this all would be, joking with a friend about playing the victim, discussing the fabricated timeline, mentioning how the judge always favors the crying one, gasps, sharp, involuntary. Even the judge's expression faltered for the first time, but Aaron wasn't finished. Next came screenshots, text messages between Kara and her mother discussing forged documents, plans for bank withdrawals, drafts of statements rehearsed down to specific phrases Kara used in her testimony. Then came the financial audit, a paper trail showing precisely how money had been siphoned, disguised, rerouted. Some of it months before the first accusation, some of it even earlier, and then photographs, staged photos Kara had taken, bruises drawn on with makeup receipts matching the shades used, timestamps that placed her at a salon during the time she claimed she'd been locked in fear. Each piece was a spark. Each spark landed directly onto the mountain of lies Kara and her mother had built, and the fire finally erupted when Aaron introduced the person sitting in the third row, the friend Kara thought was loyal. The friend she'd confided in, the friend she believed was part of their plan, the friend who had flipped, the friend who now stepped forward, voice steady and resolute, explaining the entire scheme, how Kara's mother orchestrated it. Kara practiced her tears, how they planned to destroy Aaron's reputation, annul the marriage, seize assets, and ensure Kara walked away clean and wealthy. The courtroom transformed from a place of accusation to a place of reckoning. Kara's face, all her, lost all color. Her breath became shallow. Her hands, once folded neatly, trembled uncontrollably. Her mother tried to interject, tried to regain control, but every attempt only made her look more desperate, more guilty. Aaron didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat. He simply ended with a single sentence. They tried to build a prison for me out of lies. I just showed you the truth. Silence, real, heavy, punishing silence. The judge looked at Kara and her mother with a stare that could cut through steel, and for the first time ever, they felt what Aaron had felt for weeks, fear without escape. What followed happened quickly. Legal counsel stepped in. The judge demanded an immediate review. Officers were called to escort Kara and her mother out for questioning. Some spectators moved aside, others stared in disbelief. No one looked at Aaron with suspicion anymore. They looked at him with something closer to awe, because the quietest man in the room, had just overturned an entire narrative with the truth they never expected him to have. And when the gavel struck, it wasn't just the end of a hearing. It was the collapse of the world. Kara and her mother spent years perfecting their reputation, disintegrated almost instantly. Friends distanced themselves. The community that once pitied them now whispered a different story, one of manipulation, deceit, generational schemes. Their names became synonymous with fraud. Investigators uncovered more than Aaron ever expected. Previous victims, forged documents going back years, financial extortion masquerading as emotional trauma. Kara's mother faced a list of charges long enough to fill half a page. Kara, stripped of her facade, now faced her own consequences: perjury, conspiracy, financial fraud. Every lie she told in that courtroom became a weight pulling her deeper. Their house, the one they forced Aaron out of, was seized under asset investigation. The life of luxury, the social praise, the smug confidence, they all scattered like ash in the wind. Aaron didn't celebrate. Revenge didn't need fireworks. It didn't need a triumphant speech. It didn't need him to stand over them and declare victory. He simply walked away. Not because he was heartless, but because he was finally free, and freedom was quieter than he expected, softer. Something like stepping out of a burning room into cold, clean air. Yet he left the courthouse with the same calm he carried in. No audience, no crowd chasing him, just silence, the kind that feels earned. Kara once believed burning their marriage certificate would erase his life. But in the end, the only lives reduced to ash were the ones who tried to bury him.